We are going to get started. Welcome back to our summer form series. We were off last week because I had managed to injure myself. So now I have a brace on my hand. I thought I broke it, but luckily it's not broken. We are back, jumping back in with our listing forms, which will probably drag us a little bit into September just to make sure we cover them all because we are quickly running out of August weeks. So we're jumping back in today. We're covering the residential listing agreement. Last week we covered the forms that kind of surround the listing agreement, the agency disclosure, and the ones at the end, except the MLSA today. And then we covered the grid portion of the residential listing agreement and then started to dive into some of the items that you need to be aware of as you peruse through the rest of the document. Today we'll wrap that up and then also talk about the MLSA, which is now attached to the listing agreement and really coincides with that listing agreement. They took a lot of stuff out of the listing agreement when they created the grid and the NAR settlement hit. They took a lot of stuff out of the listing agreement and put it into the MLSA. So we'll be talking about that here shortly. We're jumping back in section 9. Last week, my system abruptly decided to shut down. So I need to remember to, I don't know, hit the save button or something every once in a while so it registers that we're still working on the form. But we're jumping in section 9. We lost it at unrepresented buyers. So again, we've talked about this a few times. There's a place on the listing agreement that you can put additional compensation due to you if the buyer is not represented by an agent. So again, this is not I'm representing both the buyer and the seller. This is not buyer has their own agent. This is buyer chooses to not be represented by an agent. There's going to be additional work due. So then we have our unrepresented buyers section here, which is what justifies that additional compensation. And this is talked about not just here, it's talked about in some of the other places in the forms, which we've already covered, that goes into more detail as to why a seller may want to agree to that. But it basically just means that you're going to be doing more work. So that's what that's for. Confirmation is E. So this is all the agency. Section 9, just to recap, is the agency relationship. So confirmation, we're going to confirm the agency relationship described above prior to or concurrent with seller's execution of the purchase agreement. This is done on the residential purchase agreement. So that first section of the residential purchase agreement talks about who's representing the buyer and who's representing the seller. That is that confirmation. Termination of agency relationship if seller acknowledges and agrees that the representation duties of and agency relationship with broker terminate at expiration of the agreement, or if it occurs first, the completion of the transaction. All right, section 10. And if anybody has any questions, feel free just to unmute yourself, ask your question, say, hey, Amy, pause. Or you can raise your little Zoom hand, throw it in the chat box. I'm kind of keeping an eye on everything, so feel free to ask questions at any time. 10 is seller concessions. Note here that seller concessions contribute towards buyer's expenses, okay, towards any expenses required by buyer as part of the transaction, which means escrow, title fees, lender fees, repairs, inspections, buyer broker compensation. Concessions specified in the MLS must be allowed to be used for any permissible buyer expense or costs. May not specify that the concessions are going to be used for broker compensation. However, a term in the buyer's offer may specify that seller agrees to pay compensation. Okay, so super important there. Concessions identified in the MLS listing are not a promise to pay. So remember, anything that's in the advertising, the MLS listing, unless it actually gets written into the residential purchase agreement, it's actually not valid. So it's just not promises. It's just, here's what you can work to negotiate. So just because a seller says, yeah, I'm willing to pay concessions, doesn't mean that they're actually going to have to if it's not included as in the purchase agreement. Security insurance showing audio and video is section 11. Brokers not responsible for loss of or damage to personal real property, injury to person. whether attributable to the use of a key safe lockbox, showing of property or otherwise, third parties, including but not limited to appraisers, inspectors, brokers, prospective buyers may have access to and take videos or photographs of the interior of the property. Seller agrees to take reasonable precautions to safeguard and protect valuables that might be accessible during showings of the property and obtain insurance to protect against these risks. Broker does not maintain insurance to protect the seller. Persons visiting the property may not be aware that they could be recorded by audio and visual devices installed by seller, such as nanny cams or hidden security cameras. Sellers advised to post a notice disclosing existence of security devices. Honestly, everyone, I would create a little blurb that there may be audio and video recording devices present in this listing. I would put it in a nice little frame, and any listing that I had, I would hand that to my seller and ask them to put it near the front door so that it's visible as people walk in, or even on the front porch, because most of our security devices start with those little doorbell cameras, or there's exterior cameras. So it says here it's in the seller's responsibility to do so as a service to your sellers. I would highly recommend that you just have a bunch of those printed up. Like I said, I would put them, I'd go to like the dollar store or Home Goods. We don't have stores like that here. I had to think of the name. Home Goods. Buy a bunch of frames. They could be like 5x7 frames. Make a little blurb. You can even have it like printed on photo paper so it looks really nice and pretty, or like cardstock. Put it in there, and then any listing, just hand it off to your seller. This is an important part here too, that just the security and insurance, their homeowner's insurance should cover any liability issues or anything, but they may want to check with their insurance carrier. So you may want to make a recommendation that, hey, check in with your insurance carrier. Make sure that as people are passing through, because the property's on the market, that you would be covered for any liability issues or anything stolen. Generally speaking, it should be, but it's always a good opportunity for them to check in. The other thing to be made aware of is if the sellers are vacating the property, they're leaving the property, they're moving someplace else, and the property's going on the market, it's going to be vacant. A lot of insurance carriers, if it's a homeowner's insurance policy, they don't cover it once it's vacant. Okay, that's a different policy that your sellers need for that property. So if stuff are stolen, if there's liability issues, so if they are moving out of that property before it's going on the market or during that process, please mention to your sellers to check with their insurance carrier and make sure that their house is still covered. We unfortunately ran into this with a listing, which is how I know. We had things being stolen out of the listing. It was vacant. They were stealing things like appliances. Disassembling kitchen cabinets, don't ask, garbage disposals. Anyways, it was being broken into, things taken, and the insurance didn't cover it because the house was vacant. The other thing that you may want to have a conversation about is, we talk about this all the time when I talk about open houses, whether it's your open house or somebody else's listing that you're holding open, that you should communicate to either the listing agent or the seller that, hey, please make sure, all valuables are tucked away. Prescription medication is tucked away. Any weapons or anything like that is taken care of. And you should probably have that conversation with your sellers at the time that you take the listing, or when you're getting ready to go on the market, that, hey, all your valuables need to be tucked away. And I usually recommend that they don't tuck them away in like a top drawer of a dresser, that we go deeper than that, because sometimes, even though the dresser is not going to come with the property, I'm always amazed at how many times a buyer opens a drawer. Things in the medicine cabinet. Okay, the medicine cabinet conveys with the property. Buyers may open that medicine cabinet to see, because they're nosy. We'll say it's to see what kind of space is available in that medicine cabinet, but usually it's just because they're nosy. So they may want to move stuff out of there. So this is a good time to have those conversations. Okay, that's section 11. Photographs and internet advertising to section 12. Ownership and use of images, right? We're going to have photography, virtual tours, or other media available to buyers. Seller agrees that broker or others may photograph or otherwise electronically capture images of the interior exterior. That is a paragraph 2E. 3, it gets talked about whether that's allowed or not allowed. And just be aware that if we don't allow it, number one, we can't control what buyers do, which it talks about that. Number two, it may prevent like a listing agent from being able to come in and do a virtual video or video for buyers that may be out of the area or take additional photos where they're looking for clarity. So just a kind of a negative of limiting those activities. It also talks about like, hey, we have a lack of control of future use of the images. Like once they're out there, we don't know who has a hold of those. And once neither broker or seller have control over who can view such images, what viewers might make of the images, or how long such images may remain available on the internet. Seller further assigns any rights in all images to broker agent and agrees that such images are the property of the broker or agent, and that the broker agent may use images for advertising, including post-transaction and for broker agent's business in the future, right? So they're giving you use of those photos in the future, not just now. Third-party use and taking of images. Prospective buyers and other persons may take photographs, videos, other images. Seller understands that broker does not have the ability to control or block taking of and use of images by such persons. Once they're taken, put onto electronic display on the internet, social media, or otherwise, neither broker nor seller have control over who views the images or what nor what use viewers may make of the images. Digitally altered images, right? If we use a digitally altered image in an advertisement or other promotional material to market the property, you must comply with the business and professional code that include a reasonably conspicuous statement located on or adjacent to the image, stating that the image is altered and also clearly identifying that the original unaltered image can be accessed via a link to a publicly accessible internet website URL or QR code. If the digitally altered image is posted on an internet website controlled by the broker or broker's agent, broker must satisfy broker's legal obligation by complying, including the unaltered version along with the digitally altered. For for details on what qualifies as digitally altered and examples of image enhancements that are not considered, see the Business and Professionals Code. You should probably take time to look that up. Generally speaking, like we have photography done by professional photographers. They go in there and edit the images before posting those. Those are not going to be a digitally altered image. Okay, so those are going to be considered the original. But when we start doing things like adding fire to the fireplace, putting images on the TV screens, that's now a digitally altered image. The other things that we do is we do like virtual staging, right? Or maybe you've got somebody who it's a fixer-upper and we had photographs done and they actually like showed what the completed room could look like once it's been updated. Then we also want to include the original photos as well so they can see what the current room looks like and what it would look like with furniture, or the current room looks like and what it could look like with updates. Okay, so just a heads up on that. Section 13 is the key safe lockbox. It's designed to hold a key to the property to permit access to the property by broker, cooperating brokers, MLS participants, and their authorized licensees and representatives, authorized inspectors, and accompanied prospective buyers. Seller further agrees that broker at broker's discretion and without further approval from seller shall have the right to grant access and convey seller consent to access the property to inspectors, appraisers, workers, repair persons, and other persons requiring entry to the property in order to facilitate the sale of the property. Broker, cooperating brokers, MLS, and association boards of realtors are not insurers against injury, theft, loss, vandalism, damage attributed to the use of the key safe lockbox. Unless checked in paragraph 2J, seller authorizes the broker to install the lockbox. And if it's tenant occupied, if seller does not occupy the property, seller should be responsible for obtaining occupant's written permission for use of the key safe lockbox. And that's going to be form KLA. Okay. Sign, unless checked in paragraph 2J, seller authorized broker to install a for sale or sold sign on the property. Property is offered in compliance with federal, state, and local anti-discrimination laws. That's one of the forms attached to that. Attorney fees. In any action, proceeding, or arbitration between seller and broker arising out of this agreement, seller and broker are each responsible for paying their own attorney's fees and costs, except as provided in 19A. If an associate licensee in broker's office enters into an agreement on broker's behalf, broker or manager has the right to cancel this agreement in writing within 5 days after its execution. This blurb right here is why it's so important to make sure that you get your forms into SkySlope as soon as they're signed, right? It's supposed to be in there within 24 hours of signature so that our broker has the ability to review that document and say, hey, no, we're canceling this one. We're not listing this property. Okay, how often does that happen? I'm going to say almost never. Okay, but it's provided in this agreement, and that's why it's so important to get it uploaded within 24 hours. This agreement shall be binding upon seller and seller's successors and assigns. And then we have dispute resolution, which is mediation. So keep in mind that in our purchase agreement, we have mediation and arbitration. The arbitration clause has to be initialed by all parties to be validated. In our residential purchase agreement, are in our listing agreement, rather, RLA, it's just mediation. Okay, seller and broker agree to mediate any dispute or claim arising between them under this agreement before resorting to arbitration or court action. Mediation fees, if any, shall be divided equally among the parties involved. If for any dispute or claim to which this paragraph applies, any party, the non-mediating party, commences an action without first attempting to resolve the matter through mediation, or before commencement of an action refuses to mediate after a request has been made, then the non-mediating party is the losing party, and the non-mediating party is the losing party in any such action. They're going to be responsible for the fees. Okay. Here's the matters that should be excluded from mediation and the arbitration advisory. If you want arbitration, there's a separate form for that. It's core form ARB. That's the arbitration form. We talked about that form back in the buyer forms. We talked about that because it also, this same situation is part of the BRBC, and it's just mediation with the BRBC. And if you want arbitration to be involved in that, then you would include that ARB form. So we covered that. Adriana, you had a question?
Yeah. So how do we have to be involved if a buyer is not happy with something that happened after closing and they're now want sellers to repair, and they end up going through like mediation or arbitration? Do we have to be part of that?
No. So once the transaction closes, technically the buyer, if they're like, hey, yeah, this is not okay, like seller should have disclosed, buyer can opt to start that mediation and arbitration process with the seller. You don't have to be involved. I'm going to tell you 95% of the time you're going to get drug into it at some point, because they're going to be, when you do arbitration, so mediation, you meet with the parties. Once you go to arbitration, you can bring witnesses and stuff into it. And because you were a party to the transaction, more than likely you're going to get drug into it. So just be aware of that. The other thing that happens is when we have unhappy buyers or sellers, it's usually unhappy buyers, and they start process with the seller. Usually our buyers bring on a legal advisory of some sort, a lawyer or attorney. And more often than not, if we're going to file something against the seller, the buyer's attorney is going to recommend that they include you in that lawsuit as well, because you have E&O insurance, and those E&O insurance, they do a really good job protecting us, but they would rather pay out than go to a lengthy court or arbitration process. So oftentimes what happens is you get pulled into that, and they file against you as well, some sort of like you didn't do your duties as an agent. But no, you don't have to be part of that. You can just point your buyers in the right direction to start that process.
Okay, I have an unhappy buyer, and he keeps wanting me to keep requesting things after we close. And I'm like, dude, we're done. And the seller did agree on repairing something that he didn't do correctly, but now he wants it completely removed and redone. And I'm like, that was not part of the agreement.
Yeah. So once it goes beyond that, you can let them know that, hey, if you'd like to, like at this point, like we're done. They came back, they're going to correct it. They agreed to that. Um, and it may be that here's the listing agent's information. Please call them directly. Or here's the seller's information. If you call it, you have it, please, contact them directly. Or if you want to start proceedings, you're welcome to file a request for mediation. That would be the first step. And here's the information on how to do that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Yep. All right. Section 20 is the entire agreement, right? Prior discussions, negotiations, agreements between parties concerning the subject matter of this agreement are superseded by this agreement, which constitutes the entire contract and complete and exclusive expression of the agreement, right? So we might have sat down at the table and had a conversation, but if it didn't get included in this, it doesn't count. That would be the same for like if they thought you said you were going to take a reduced commission, whatever's in this actually stands. The other thing is that everything has to be in writing, right? So oral agreements don't count. And if any provision in this agreement is held ineffective or invalid, the remaining provisions will give in full force and effect. Okay, and we can have a photocopy of this or a faxed version of this or the original, and it could be signed in counterparts, which means I might sign this copy. My seller might have signed a separate copy, but as long as it's the exact same document, my signature's on one, their signature's on another, it still counts. That's what counterparts are. Ownership, title, and authority. Seller is stating that they are the owner of the property. No other persons or entities have title to the property, and they have the authority to execute this agreement. Legally authorized signers. Okay, so this is if it's in a regular, like a trust or an entity owns it, where the signature or initials of the legally authorized signers are. They're considered valid signatures. And then this next page here, this is where they sign it. If it is an entity seller, okay, whether it's a non-individual entity seller, that would be like a trust, corporation, LLC, probate estate, partnership, right? We're going to check this box here for entity. You're going to fill out the full name of that entity. So if it's like a trust, it would be like the Petard Revocable Trust, right? Or the Petard Living Trust. You're going to put out the full name of that. If it's like a court case, because it's under probate, you would put the full name of the estate, including the case number. Okay, you get that from the court, right? So any of those, if it's a corporation, you would put, right, like 123 I Buy Properties LLC, right? That would be the entity name. And then you're going to put down here on section 4 the names of the legally authorized signers. Okay, so that would be like the trustees, the co-trustees, if there's more than one. It would be maybe the president of the company if he has the authority to sign on behalf of the LLC. Okay, so whatever that is. If you have more than 2 legally authorized signers, then we would go to an additional signature addendum, an ASA. The first 2 would be listed here. They would sign here, and then we would check this little box down here, okay, for attached signature, additional signature addendum for if we have more than 2 signers. And that is whether we have a representative capacity disclosure here where we have entity sellers or not. If we just have multiple sellers, more than 2, we go with the additional signature addendum. We don't just squeeze them in. Okay. Then we have our broker signatures here. Fill out all this information. If we have more than 2, if we have 2 agents representing the sellers, maybe you're on a team, we can include the AAA form, which is the additional agent acknowledgement form, just stating that, hey, it doesn't matter wherever you see these agents' names. Taryn may sign one, I may sign another. It doesn't matter. They're both representing the sellers. So that would be the AAA form. Or if you have two brokers with different companies co-listing the property, then we would include the ABA form, the additional broker acknowledgement. Where would we see that? We don't see it very often, but you might see it. It's a divorce. You're going to list the property. Maybe the husband wants one company, the wife wants another. You're one of those two companies. So now we have two brokers co-listing the property to help keep all the parties happy. That's the ABA form. If that happens, you may just want to run for the hills and let somebody else have that listing. Good luck. But anyways, that's where those two boxes come into play and those two forms. We've already talked about those forms. I will not be covering them here in the month of August. Any questions about the listing agreement before we move on to the MLSA? All right, moving right along to our MLSA. This is attached to our residential listing agreement. This is our Multiple Listing Service Addendum, MLSA. It was new and created, I don't know, a year ago, maybe year and a half ago, right about the time the settlement came down. And this is attached. It goes over all the details with listing the property. Okay. Multiple listing service. What is an MLS? It talks about what it is, why we would want to use it, why your property should be listed in the MLS. Realtor owned MLSs. Okay. They're obligated to comply with the rules from the National Association of Realtors. Okay, which means that once it's been publicly marketed, defined in paragraph 3, the broker has taken the listing who belongs to a realtor-owned MLS should submit the information describing price, terms, conditions under which the seller's property is offered for sale to the MLS. They will not publish offers of compensation from seller's broker to buyer's broker. Okay. How does that come in? Well, anyways, moving on. C is what information is provided to the MLS after sale. That's going to be the terms of the transaction, sales price, financing, concessions. That's going to be provided to the MLS in which the property is listed or publication, dissemination by use by persons, entities, and terms approved by the MLS, and may be provided to the MLS even if the property was not listed with the MLS. Seller consents to broker providing a copy of this listing agreement to the MLS if required by the MLS. Keep that in mind too. It says here that even if the property was not listed with the MLS, if you had a off-market transaction, maybe we got the listing agreement signed, somebody made an offer on it, or maybe we've got like a tenant buying property from the landlord that they already reside in and it never went in the MLS, you can submit that property to the MLS for comparison purposes only. It also is what allows you to get credit for it when you look up like broker metrics and stuff. So that's how those get tracked. So you'll see listings get inputted that way that's sold off market. What is a broker MLS? Brokerage belongs to an MLS to the MLS the MLS specified in 2E1 of the agreement and possibly others. Broker shall inform seller if the MLS specified in the agreement is not the primary for the geographic area of the property. Property will be listed with the MLS as specified. Okay. Benefits of using an MLS and the impact of opting out, exposure to buyers through the MLS. Impact of opting out of the MLS. So if you've got a seller that's thinking that they maybe don't want to be listed in the MLS, here's where you'd find some information here in section 2 of why it's important to be in the MLS, reduction in exposure, not listing a property in the local MLS. Here's all of those things that you can go over with your sellers. Public and private marketing of property or the clear cooperation policy. Unless 3E is checked, the MLS to which the broker is submitting the listing has adopted the policy of NAR, which requires that that exclusive and seller reserved listings for residential real property with 1 to 4 units and vacant lots can be submitted to the MLS within 1 business day of any public marketing. Clear cooperation. Public marketing includes, but is not limited to, flyers displayed in windows, yard signs, digital marketing on public-facing websites, brokerage website displays, digital communication marketing, and email blast. Multi-brokerage listing sharing networks. marketing to closed or private listing clubs or groups, and applications available to the general public. In guidance from NAR, that's the National Association of Realtors, private marketing permits all agents affiliated with the broker to engage in one-to-one promotion between those agents and their clients and one-to-one promotion with other licensees who may communicate to their clients. Not all MLSs have implemented or follow the NAR guidance, and the seller should discuss the broker what is allowed under the MLS rules. Different status options may be available for exclusive or seller reserved listings taken by members of the MLS. Marketing options for listings submitted to the MLS may include full exposure, delayed marketing, and if available by the MLS, coming soon or equivalent status. The status option for listings not submitted to the MLS is usually office exclusive. See paragraph 5 for more information. Okay, this is important because,
Question, Amy.
yes.
For like you said, if you were there and you wanted to get the listing signed, but they wanted to do some work for it and you weren't quite sure when it was going to go on the market, but you still want this signed, what would you still have 24 hours to get it in the MLS? Do you just make a guess for a day of when it potentially will be and then revisit when you go live? Or how do you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So on my listing agreement, if I'm sitting down with a seller and they're like, man, we really want to have the house painted before we go on the market. We still haven't selected our painter, so we don't have it scheduled yet. We have no idea when this is going to happen. I'm still going to put, okay, well, what do we think? Or we think like it's going to be like a month out, 2 months out. They're like, well, probably let's go for 2 months out and we can always change it. So on my listing agreement, my on market date is going to be a date. My listing agreement's going to start now, but the on market date, I'm going to put like a month or 2 months out or whatever we agreed to, because
Okay.
you can always change it. It still needs to be put into SkySlope, which is our compliance system, within 24 hours. It doesn't need to go into Barry's. Let's say it's a Barry's listing,
Oh,
into
okay.
Barry's right away, because we're not going to publicly market the property. Now, Barry's does have a rule that for any signed listing agreement, it needs to go in there within 3 days of the signed listing agreement, even if it's not being marketed to the public. So the workaround is on the Barry's website. When you log into Barry's, before you click on the actual like square that says Barry's, when you're on their main page, there's a spot on there that's like useful links or whatever. One of those is to exclude a listing from the MLS. So anytime we have a listing that's not going to go in the MLS right away, we would exclude it. So we fill out that exclusion form. And that's what allows you to not have to put it into the MLS or market it to the public right away. We're also going to talk about it here in just a second. We'll go into that just a little bit more because it talks about it.
Okay.
But that's, you would want to opt out and then fill out that exclusion form.
Exclusion form. Okay, thank you.
No problem. And then when you do decide when it's going on the market, or if that date that you picked is coming up, you would just want to do a modification of the listing agreement to adjust that time frame appropriately.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So so this is right, public and private marketing, A, B, C, D, and then we have or E. Clear cooperation policy does not apply. The MLS used by the broker to market the property does not have a clear cooperation policy that applies to the property. Broker shall disclose to seller and obtain seller's consent for instruction not to market the property on the MLS or to the public. So keep in mind, Barry's, so Bay Area Real Estate Information Services, Barry's, which is our primary one for the office, does not adhere to the clear cooperation policy. Okay, so that would be any properties listed in Solano, Napa, Sonoma, Marin, Sonoma, Marin. I feel like I'm missing one. Anyways, those counties serviced by Barry's. So even though I can go into Barry's and put a listing in Sacramento, the MLS that controls that listing is MetroList, and they do adhere to the clear cooperation policy. Barry's does not. That being said, most of us, if not all of us, are realtors, which means we've agreed to the clear cooperation policy. So even though Barry's doesn't agree to the clear cooperation policy, we do. So just keep that in mind. One of the workarounds for that, of getting it, if we're going to start marketing it to the public, right? It should be because we are ethical members of the National Association of Realtors. even if Barry's doesn't require it, if we're going to market the property to the public, right? We're going to put a sign in the yard. We're going to post about it online. We're going to send out coming soon postcards. It should be in Barry's as a coming soon listing so that it's out there to the general public. Just throwing that out there. But if it is going in Barry's, we can check this box here that it does not apply. That's why we can exclude it, but we still can't market it to the public until we're ready to put it in the MLS in one capacity or another. Keep in mind that for that property that was being painted, that's not going on the market right away, we have the right to market that to our office because the listing agreements with our brokerage, so we can market it at our office meetings. We can post it in the Foxhole group, right? So you can market it between your brokerage agents. And let's say that I run into, I don't know, somebody, one of the other agents in our area, the McGuires, and we're having a conversation in downtown Vacaville, and then we say, oh yeah, they talk about, man, I've got this client. We're really having a hard time finding a property. And you're like, oh my gosh, I have one. I just got the listing agreement signed last week. They're just finishing up the painting. So that one-on-one communication we can have with other agents, and then they can share it with theirs. So that does fall underneath those rules. Just anytime we start posting for sale signs, sending out flyers, posting it on our MLS, now that's public marketing. So even though Barry's doesn't reply to our adhere to it, we do as realtors. So just keep that in mind. All right. But we can check this box if it's going to go in the Barry's service area. Property listing information on the internet. An MLS can send information about properties listed on the MLS to public real estate portals, including those operated by the MLS, right? So this is just saying that, hey, it's going to send those out to places like realtor.com, Zillow, homes.com. Other realtors can put it on their websites. It's going out on the internet. Total internet opt-out. Seller may prevent the property from being marketed on the internet, which will keep the property in the MLS systems only for access by other brokers, their agents, their customers, but the property will not be displayed outside the MLS on real estate portals, on broker's own website or social media, cooperating MLS broker or agents' websites, or syndication advertising sales. Seller understands this opt-out would mean consumers search for listings on the internet will not see the property. So when we put properties into Barry's MLS, if somebody wants to opt out of internet, it'll say, do we want to, I don't remember the exact question, but it's like, do you want to display this information on the internet or something like that? And there's a little drop down of either yes or no. If we say no, it's not going to push it out to anything but the MLS. Okay, it's not going to go out to any of those external sites. The second question there is like, do you want the full address or partial address promoted out there? If we choose anything but full address, it's not going to show up on any of the map searches on any of the other sites. So just keep that in mind. Okay, that's in the MLS system. Limited internet information and opt-outs. Here's where it says property or property address. Okay, that's where we can not have the property address floating out there. It won't show up on map searches, but it will show up if we search, Vacaville homes that are 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. It'll show up there, but it's not going to show the address. It's just going to show a partial address, like Vacaville, California. Feature opt-outs. They can instruct broker to advise the MLS that seller does not want visitors or participants, subscriber websites, or electronic displays that display listings to have features below. Seller understands these opt-outs may apply only to websites or electronic displays. Okay. Comments and reviews. So we can opt out of those or opt out of automated estimate of values. Okay. So you can opt out of those. Marketing options. An MLS may have different categories for options for marketing the property, including but not limited to the options in paragraph 5A through D, which is full exposure. Okay. Delayed marketing, limited exposure. So that's like our coming, or not even coming soon. So we have full exposure, delayed. This is where we would exclude it from the MLS. So delayed marketing, limited exposure would be fall under this one, I believe. Okay, coming soon. This is one we have in our MLS. Okay, that we can have it as coming soon status. Office exclusive or limited exposure. Okay, where we're just keeping it within our office. And then days on market. So remember that regardless of marketing option chosen, seller's advised to discuss with broker on how many days on market calculations or similar tracking fields work in the MLS. Photographs is section 6. Okay, they may take photographs of the inside or outside of the property, and we don't really have control over who will do that. Property listing information. Okay. Total internet opt-out. Seller requests that broker advise. So we have all the information above, and now here's where they can opt in or opt out. Seller does not want property to be displayed on the internet. Seller understands and acknowledges this option is checked. Consumers who search for listings on internet sites may not see information about the property. We don't want to be on the internet. So we're only going to market word of mouth one-on-one. Okay. No public marketing. Limited opt-out. We just want the property address to not be displayed. Okay, that would be option number 1. B2 is features opt-out. Here's where we don't want people to be able to comment or review, or we don't want to see an automated estimate of value with that property. You can check those boxes as well. Usually we don't check any of these boxes. We're going to promote it. Marketing option. The marketing option selected below shall start at the beginning of the listing period on or on blank dates. So for the question about the house that was being painted that's not going on the market for a month, our listing period is going to start now. Okay, so that property is under our listing agreement. If they decide to sell it for any reason at any time, it goes back to us. But the listing period, this is when it's actually going to go on market, might be September 20th. We're going to go September 21st. Actually, I like Wednesdays, so I'm going to say, hey, we think it's going to be a month. We're going to put September 23rd. Okay, or blank date, when painting is finished. Okay, so you could put that in there as well. Okay, it's delayed marketing until we're ready to go on market. So that's going to cause this to trigger. So full exposure, market the property with full exposure to the public starting at the beginning of the listing period. Okay, so that would be listing period or blank date. So if we filled in a date here, like September 23rd, now this is going to apply starting September 23rd with full exposure. If we left this blank, it would be the beginning of the listing period, full exposure would happen. So that means that, hey, within 24 hours of publicly marketing, it needs to be in the MLS, ready to be marketed. Okay, your other option for 2B is delayed marketing, limited exposure. Market the property as delayed marketing, limited exposure. Seller understands that even though the property be submitted to the MLS, the property's data will not be syndicated to third-party websites, nor exposed through other member IDX websites. The property will be available for others to see, tour, and inform their clients. So we don't have this option on our MLS, so that's probably not going to be one that we check, but we might check coming soon. Market the property under coming soon policy. Broker has explained the parameters of coming soon and the impact it might have on marketing the seller's property. So we may be marketing it as coming soon starting on that date, or starting now, we're going to market it as coming soon, and then we're going to go full marketing, once property is painted. Or we can market as office exclusive, limited exposure. Not all MLSs have implemented or followed our guidance. The seller should discuss with broker what is allowed under the MLS rules. Market the property as office exclusive limited exposure. Seller instructs broker to exclude the property from full dissemination by the MLS for the time period specified below. Seller certifies that seller understands no public marketing will occur, right? So this is one that we're going to fill out that exclusion form for. It's not going on the market right now. We can still market it to the office though. Okay. Do not market the property to the public during the entire listing period unless seller gives broker written instruction. So if we check this box here for 2D, if it's going to be an office exclusive listing as of the date of the signed listing agreement, the listing period. Okay. Then we have a choice down here that do not market the property to the public during the entire listing period is what the default is for 2D. Or we check the box for 2D2, which means we're going to begin marketing the property to the public under full exposure, including through the MLS on September 23rd. So in the case that we have a seller who's going to paint the property, it's not going to be available for a month to be marketed because we got to finish painting first. Where I personally would fill it out here in section 2. The marketing options selected below should start at the beginning of the listing period, which is the date I got the listing agreement signed. That I'm going to do an office exclusive limited exposure, which allows me to talk about the property to the office, communicate that with the other agents in our office, okay, or direct one-on-one promotion, okay, between me and my other clients. And then I'm going to begin marketing the property to the public under full exposure beginning on this date. Okay, if I know the date. If I don't know the date, maybe they're getting it painted. We have no idea when it's going to be painted. You could just leave it as the default of 2D1, which is, hey, we're not going to market the property to the public during the terms of listing agreement. Then once the property's painted, we've got photos ready to go on the market. I'm just going to come back with a modification of the listing agreement saying seller chooses to begin marketing the property to the public under full exposure on blank date with a modification of the listing agreement. Okay, so if we don't have a date, this might be your best option is to go 2D and leave it at that. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a question for marketing privately, like to database, maybe other agent partners. I don't see that as an option, but I believe it is, correct?
Yeah, so under the office exclusive, that allows you to market it to any of the other agents in our office because, again, our listing agreement is with the brokerage. They're agreeing to list this property with Realty One Group Fox, and then Fox has hired you to list the property. So it's with the brokerage. So we can share it with any of the agents in our office and any of our own personal clients. Falls under that.
What if we wanted to market it and sell it off market, maybe to other brokerages before, like if you can sell it prior? I mean,
so yeah, so that would be you would market it as a coming soon then if we want to mass throw it out there to other brokerages in the area, we would want it as a coming soon. If so this office exclusive limited exposure would also allow me, like if I ran into another agent in our community on the street, I could have a conversation with them and then they could show the property to their clients. So we can do one-on-one like communication marketing, but we can't do like mass emails or social media posts, even in like realtor only groups, like nothing like that. That would be public marketing.
Okay, and then with the coming soon, I guess maybe I read it more as like have to be in the MLS in under coming soon status. Is that correct?
That is correct. So again, and this goes back to this like gray area where Barry's doesn't adhere to the clear cooperation policy because it's not a realtor owned MLS. It's a participant owned MLS. However, we also belong to the National Association of Realtors. So even though Barry's doesn't adhere to the clear cooperation policy, we've agreed that we're going to adhere to it. So this is where that gray area comes in. So I would operate as if you're going to post it in like the Sacramento MLS, which does adhere to the clear cooperation policy. So if we're not going to put it in the MLS right away, we want to mark it as an office exclusive limited exposure. And when you'll begin marketing that, or just do a modification of terms for that. If we want to market it, if we want to be able to email it out to other agents, we want people to be aware of it, but we're just not ready to show it yet. It's getting some updates, but we want people to know about it for the potential that we sell it before it officially comes on market. And we want it like seen by the masses, but we don't have to show it yet. Then it will be coming soon. Now, in the Metro List area, you don't have that coming soon option.
Mhm.
Yeah. because they believe, so once it goes in the MLS, in like most other MLS systems outside of where the Berries serves, then it needs to be publicly when you're publicly marketing it, it needs to be available to be shown. And on coming soon status, it doesn't have to be shown. So Berries allows coming soon, which is their workaround to the National Association of Realtors Clear Cooperation Policy.
Thank you.
Yep. I know this is confusing. Any other questions on that section? Because it's really a meaty section. All right. Other instructions, section 3 is, oh, cancel. No, don't do this. Let's see. Don't close out. See if we saved it. Maybe. I may have saved it. All right. Section 3 is other instructions. Seller and broker may agree to additional terms, the items listed below, but they'll be subject to the MLS rules and what is permitted in the MLS. Visitors are not restricted from taking photos is the default, or seller instructs broker to publish in the MLS that taking of images is limited to those persons preparing appraisals or inspection reports. So that would be the option there. Otherwise, the default is that visitors are not restricted from taking photos or images. And then there's other instructions or terms here for 3B. You would fill that in with anything you want there. For the most part, this form is pretty straightforward. You're going to select an option of, are we just getting it on the market? Is it going to be, most properties that we get a listing agreement signed for are not ready to go in the MLS within 24 hours. I'm going to promise you that. So for the most part, we're going to have some sort of marketing option. If it's just like, hey, we're getting photos in the next couple of weeks, then it's going to be full exposure is going to start on X date. When are we going on the market? It's going to be September 2nd. Okay, that's the easiest options. We just default to this, that marketing option selected below, which is full exposure, starting to the public at the beginning of the listing period. So remember, if we're going to go 9-2, we still have to fill out the exclusion form in the MLS that we have a signed listing agreement that's not going in yet. It's not being marketed to the public. Okay. The other option would be, hey, we want to just market it to the office exclusive. We still might have the date there of September 2nd. Actually, no, we wouldn't want that because then we can't market it to the office until the 2nd. So we would want it here with no date, just saying that we can start it here. And then we're going to begin marketing the public full exposure on a specific date. So most of the time, we're going to fill something out in this section. Any questions? All right. That covers our multiple listing or our MLSA, our RLA, which is our residential listing agreement. We also already talked about disclosure and consent of more than one possible, more than, let's call this again, disclosure and seller consent to possible representation of more than one seller and dual agency in a transaction. We talked about the disclosure information advisory, which is my favorite form. We've talked about the broker compensation advisory. We talked about the agency disclosure. We've talked about the fair housing and discrimination advisory. The seller's advisory we covered last week as well, and the California Consumer Privacy Act advisory. So all those were covered last week. No, these are all the forms that it added. Next week, I'm going to wrap up for this week. It's 9:53, so I'm not going to start a new form. Next week, we're going to dive into some of the additional forms that we see that are attached to this listing agreement. Things like the exempt seller disclosure, our mobile home listing addendum, our probate listing addendum, all of those fun things that you'll find, the SPRP, the seller's purchase of replacement property. So as realtors, the question is, do we check 3E? Okay, hold on. Let me scroll back up. All right. Do we check 3E? Hold on. Crystal, 3E on the listing agreement itself.
I'm sorry. It must be up. It talks about like berries and that berries doesn't follow certain rules, but that
Oh.
we are as realtors. Um,
Yeah, so you can absolutely check if
right
it's going
there.
into Barry's service area, we would check this box for the clear cooperation policy doesn't apply. You absolutely can check that because that is, according to the MLS, they don't adhere to that clear cooperation policy. And then that being said, because we are realtors, we do adhere to it still, but we can check the box that the MLS does not.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So I will see you in 2 weeks back here, and I'll get that link in case you want to attend that training with me next week because I think it'll be good.